G'day everyone, my name's Cautious Pancake, and today let's talk about zombie force fields in 2.0. What's working, what's not working, and a new block to use that is hands down the best force field block I've ever seen. As a bit of background for those new to the game, a zombie force field is a building technique used to control zombie pathing, usually at ground level, by digging a trench, 4 blocks deep, 2 blocks wide, then filling up the top block space with some of the special zombie force field blocks that you can walk over, but that zombies do not think they can. So they are forced to go around the outside while you can scoot straight over the top. This means you can surround an entire base or a small structure like your farm with a force field that will stop the zombies going in, at least as long as you've given them a valid path to get to you. You can see that if I remove the path completely and go full force field, the zombies suddenly remember that they can walk over the blocks and come straight in. The other part to remember is that force fields won't stop spiders from jumping over the trench, or any ranged attacks like cop spit, plague spitters, or our new furry boulder chuckers. However, they are really good at channeling zombies into the area that you want them to go. Many bases will use elevation to do this with a typical ramp upwards, but force fields are another option. You can also just use trenches, but what makes a force field truly useful is the ability for it to allow you to walk, run, or ride over it, while immediately forcing the zombies to go a longer way around and head through the defined entrance that you can then choose to block up with a fighting position or with traps. In terms of blocks that we know work for force fields, there's quite a few. Here's a quick recap of the combinations that are still working. Keep in mind that the second block listed is there only to stop you from falling through the trench, so you can swap these around if you prefer a different style. Of these, up until now, my personal favourite was the arch 3 meter tip, mainly because in addition to the single layer approach, you can also add a double layer on top of it to make a fully solid force field that, despite the small bump in the middle, was very smooth to drive over, especially with a few sheets either side to flatten out the terrain. Anyway, that's the main zombie force fields that are still working. Next, we have to talk about the storage cube. I did a video on this back in 1.0 where I thought it was the bee's knees, but it turned out even back then it had some reliability issues. Now I know Joridal's done a video on this already and had some issues with it, but honestly it actually works better in 2.0 than it did in 1.0. I won't go into the why, I have some theories, but they're for another day. The storage cube force field still mostly works, and has the advantage of needing only a single block trench dug down, saving a lot of time on the digging, particularly if you want to use these in the early game. It then mostly works as normal, where you can walk over it, but the zombies will run around to the entrance that you've left, assuming that you don't run into one of those times that it just glitches and lets the zombies run straight over. So it's pretty cool and all, but with a question mark over its reliability, it's no longer the one that I recommend. Which brings me to the new stuff. Before I lay it out, first, I've got a shout out to Rooster Gold. He gave me the heads up on this new block, so a massive shout out and thanks to Rooster. Without further ado, the new block that you want to add to your building repertoire is the Plate Facade 01 block. Well, it and the 02 block, as well as the other variants, they all kind of work. As to what makes this block so special, in short, no digging. You can grab this block and just slap it straight down on the ground and you've got yourself a zombie force field. It looks nuts, I know. Like, how can the zombies not walk over that? But there it is. Zombies avoid it completely and run around the outside to the entrance. There is one potential issue with it though. While it works great as a basic test, if you go for a more realistic setup with a basic base structure inside a 20 by 20-ish force field, then what you get is it mostly working, but sometimes with the zombies just ignoring it and running over the top. To fix that though, just add a second row. Like with the original basic force fields that work over a trench that's 2 blocks wide, this also works better with that extra bit of width. As you can see now, the zombies don't run over it at all. Now there's another option that I think is really cool about this block, and that's that you can use it standing up as well as flat. If we put the fence up for a basic test, you can see that despite the fact that the zombies should be able to jump straight over it, they choose to run around it and still treat it as a force field. It's worth noting that if you use normal plate blocks instead of the facade plate blocks, then the zombies do just jump straight over and come and eat your brains. Well, I swear that worked a minute ago, but even though it's not working right now, it's definitely the block acting as a force field and not something that works for all plate blocks. The other awesome thing about this is that you can then double it up as well. And not only do the zombies avoid it, they run a full block length away from the outside of the plate, which should massively minimize any occasional damage done to the blocks. Other than true rage mode attacks, the zombies won't stop to hit the block since they can't accidentally bump into it and get stuck. The fact that you can use these blocks as plates also creates some interesting opportunities. Given the purpose of a traditional force field is to allow us to run over the block to get away from a zombie while forcing that zombie to run all the way around the outside, the great part of the plate block is that if you put two of the blocks rotated away from each other in the middle of the fence, the zombies still consider this a closed force field and ignore it completely, providing what I think is the best possible force field entrance for any of the bikes. You can ride straight in, no bumps, no fuss, and as soon as you're inside the force field, the zombies are forced out and around. You can put one on both sides as well, so you never have to turn your bike around, just ride in and out. Doing the same for a 4x4 is a little trickier, but it's the same concept. You can create a 4 wide gap in the fence by using 2 blocks rotated outwards for the fence as we did before, and then 2 blocks on the ground in the middle and use the plate ramp corner inside block to smooth the run up to them. This means that the entire section is still a force field wall, but one that the 4x4 can drive through. And of course you could go wider with this same concept as well, just by adding more flat blocks on the ground in the middle. So I hope you agree that this block seems pretty awesome. But what's the catch? There's always a catch, right? Well, apart from the risk of this getting nerfed, and Fun Pimps, if you're listening, I really hope you'll consider leaving this one alone, as I think it brings back something really interesting, which I'll get to more later in the video. The main catch that I've found so far is that I've had some differing behaviour depending on the material used. As an example, using this wall with all of the plates made of cobblestone, you can see that the zombies will obey the force field and walk around the outside. However, if we downgrade it to wood, then all of a sudden they can walk over it. I'm not sure what causes this, and if this is a glitch that just sometimes occurs in testing, but it's something to be aware of. Also, talking materials, the fence approach doesn't like it when the materials change, so don't mix and match. If you've got a concrete wall that works just fine, and then add a cobblestone block in the middle of it, then all of a sudden that becomes a weakness that the zombies seem to be able to use. The only other catch I found is that it doesn't work on an elevated walkway. For traditional force field blocks, when you use them in an elevated base to create a walkway, the zombies will ignore this as a path and go for blocks that they can see and walk over. For the facade plate blocks though, this doesn't work and the zombies will absolutely use this as a path to run over. So the blocks behave differently when they aren't at ground level. That's all there is for the weaknesses that I found though. Of course, if you do find some more, please let me know in the comments. So what do I think this is useful for? Well, especially early on, this will allow for cobblestone fences to be built around the areas that you want to protect, which in turn changes the meta for base building, to an extent anyway. One thing I miss these days is a way to use some of the nice POIs that are in game, especially the smaller ones, at ground level, as so much of your Horde Knight base building defences is centred around elevation to control pathing and getting outside of the 11 block range to avoid rage mode. This new force field method, without needing to dig massive trenches, means that you can potentially pick a nice little POI that you want to call home, then build a fence around it, leaving a deliberate entry point for where and how you want to do the fighting for Horde Knight. Without elevation, you will lose the ability to drop zombies off the base path and gain time as they need to run back around, but if you are sick of the elevated base, this might be something to try anyway. Which is why I don't think that this should be patched out, as it brings in a new and interesting way to play that, while a little bit cheesy, is probably less cheesy in a way than using the elevated drop bases that are so familiar these days. And if you were still wanting to go with an elevated base, using these plates around the entrance ramp is a great alternative way to keep the zombies from smashing up the start of the ramp, as they have to run past the force field box and come back straight at the ramp. They won't get stuck and attack your base. Anyway, that's the new plate facade zombie force field. Please drop a like if you found this useful and consider subscribing if you'd like to see more 7 Days 2.0 videos in the future. Massive thanks as always to my patrons for their support. Thanks to you for watching this video, and happy force fields.